I think it is no accident that this book is dedicated to every mother whose child only knows half the story. There are things about me that my child may never know. And she's in a way not even supposed to.
And
You
she's
know,
not
it's
interested right now.
yeah, not definitely not gonna happen right now. And so you have to kind of the selflessness of motherhood is so profound
Hmm.
because your kid doesn't even know all the things that you did for them and they'll never know. And that means the stories you didn't tell them. That means the stuff that you maybe hid that because you thought it might have not been the right decision, but you thought it was the right decision. There's a lot of things about motherhood that are shrouded, that are kind of hidden. And it is a beast of a thing, being a mother. It is a real weird, wild thing. Um, and as somebody who, has had her own ups and downs with her own mother, it is something to see how I mother
Mhm.
and to just release and let go of the things you don't control. You don't control how your kid sees you.
Hello and welcome to At the Podium with me, Patrick Huey. At the Podium is a multimedia platform where story by story, we explore the resiliency of the human spirit with people who are using their own personal journeys to leave a positive and transformative imprint on our world today. At the Podium holds a space for meaningful conversation, inspiration, and life. Today, I'm thrilled to share the podium with Attica Locke. Attica is a New York Times bestselling author. Her book, Bluebird, Bluebird, won the Edgar Award for Best Novel. She is the winner of the Harper Lee Prize and Ernest Gaines Award and has been shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction and nominated for a Los Angeles Times Book Prize and an NAACP Image Award. Attica is also a screenwriter and TV producer with credits that include Empire, When They See Us, Little Fires Everywhere, and the #1 show on Netflix, From Scratch. Attica is a native of Houston, Texas, and she lives in Los Angeles, California. Attica, welcome back to At the Podium.
I am thrilled to be here.
It is such an honor always to sit down and talk to you and spend some time with you because I always walk away feeling like I have a deeper, better understanding of the world we're living in. So thank you for making time.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to talk about your book, Guide Me Home, which is the third installment. And might this be the final installment
It
of
is.
it? So we're going to talk about that in just a minute in the Darren Mathews crime saga, mystery saga, which I've read all three books and I love them. But before we get into that, I want to read a quote from the book that we're both from Texas, and we share a love of the state and all of its richness and multi-layered, all of it from the state. And there's this really wonderful quote in the book, and we're looking at the state of Texas through the eyes of a character in the book who is an undocumented worker. His name is Ray, and he and his family have moved across the country, and they've ended up in this small town in East Texas. And this is what you write. You say, through Ray's eyes, of all the places they'd lived, he found this one to be the most frustrating to his sense of order in the natural world. It was achingly beautiful. Slate blue sky in the fall, a gem-like sapphire in the spring and summer, set above land so fecund and verdant as to nearly embarrass itself with its showy beauty. Every turn scented by pine and the sweet smokiness of red cedar. But the air itself, no matter the season, was often thick and muggy as a wet cotton ball, and you couldn't go 10 feet without being met by a pushy mosquito or a gang of gnats or both. Roaches flew here. There were scorpions and swamp rats. Going outside required a level of fortitude just barely commensurate with any pastoral pleasure that awaited you. To see its grace, Texas was going to make you put in the work. Why is Texas such a multi-layered, complicated? I don't love the word complicated because I think it's deeper than that. But why is Texas that for you?
Well, you can start with exactly what's there. The physicalness of it is so awesome and overwhelming and varied. The state is so big that there's desert, there's mountains, there's sea, there's prairie, there's everything. It's just overwhelming that a space that big sits under one cultural umbrella, even as it has these other little pockets of subcultures. So there's just the physicality of it, first of all. And then it's a contradiction for me because it is the place where I feel the safest and most afraid.
Hmm.
I feel at home when I'm in Texas. I feel like I get this place, I understand this place. I feel like I trust them. And then sometimes I feel like I don't know if I trust them. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And it's just full of contradictions.
Mm. It's interesting you use that word contradictions because I feel like in the book, it was 300 pages of contradictions. And I never knew up from down, left from right from wrong, whose side I was on. And within the course of a scene, that would switch. So I would be like, oh, well, I think, he's being a little hard on his mother, Belle. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, well, no, he's not because of some of the things that she does. But, the story takes place during the Trump administration. And what I love is we're sort of starting to get the first blush of literature from that time. And so I was really interested in your perspective on it. And there are characters in the book that we would recognize as Trump supporters who we think, oh, of course, this person is a Trump supporter. But then what you do is you flip it on its head and you introduce the family of the missing girl at the center of the book, who are Black Trump supporters. And so we start to understand why that happens. But I want to know why you felt the need to tell that story and do the inversion of what we thought we would find with that family. Why was that important for you?
Well, one, I'm trying to figure it out. I mean, some of them Trump supporters that we see on TV are not real. There's just no way. But some are. And there is a way in which something about what he represents is speaking to a slice of mostly male Black folks. And I was curious about that. Um, I will say that I don't know how I'm going to articulate this. The idea of this missing Black girl from an all white space, and I'm almost hesitant to talk about this because I want to write about it someday. But there was a story maybe 5, 6, 7 years back about a bunch of football moms in like of their kids play high school football together in Atlanta, I believe, or a suburb of Atlanta, and that the moms had a sleepover one night, and they were all white except one Black woman, and she died that night, and nobody ever could figure out what happened. And it just something about the story when I would look at it, didn't sound, something felt off.
Mhm.
I'm not, maybe nothing nefarious happened, but there was something so odd about that to me. And I thought about what it is to be in these white spaces. What are Black folks getting out of it when they're in these white spaces? I will just admit, I have been sucked up into at one point or another in my life, the feeling of, oh, that white approval. I've been in a moment like, oh, that's a different kind of feeling. That feels kind of good. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
And to take that to its extreme, in my opinion, that's where a Candace Owens comes from, or a Tim Scott comes from. It comes from that feeling is so intoxicating that it is blotting out all other kind of reason.
Right.
And so I just wanted to kind of explore that and look at that. And that's where it came from. And wanting to upend expectation, to also challenge Darren to have to see past his own biases. That
Mm.
just because this dad is a Trump supporter doesn't necessarily mean he hurt his child. Or does it? I don't know. You clearly, in my opinion, Attica's opinion, you have poor judgment if you're a Black Trump supporter, but that's my opinion. So I wanted to kind of play with all of that kind of stuff. And Patrick, I was worried about it. I cannot express, you can ask Tembe, my sister, and ask my husband or my therapist, terror I had about this book. I was so afraid. I was so afraid that I was going to fail, that people were
Mm.
just going to, what are you even doing?
Mm. I want to talk about that fear in a minute because it came up for me in a different way as I was reading the
Mm,
book. Actually, we'll get to that in a minute. But it's interesting that you talk about failure in the context of how you're describing it because that is something that has emerged throughout this particular season of the show, that the specter of failure lives on our shoulders,
Mhm.
and that the people who can move past that or breathe deep enough to still move forward find some kind of, not a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but find some kind of validation, justification for the choices that they've made and the steps they've taken. So I think that idea, because we've never had this conversation about failure in terms of your work. So this is the first time I'm hearing that. So that's new information for me. And I find it really fascinating. And I'm wondering if part of the fear of failure is part of the context of the rubric we live in now, where people are canceled for
Mhm.
expressing some of the ideas that you express in the book. The fact that you actually take on the Obamacare rhetoric against it.
I was scared of that. I was
Yeah,
very scared of that.
but I was glad you did it. I like literally, as I think as we grow as people, I think we have to become much more sophisticated and understanding that all in the book is shaped like this. All sides have a seat, a voice at the table, and all sides are not clean in the debate, right? And so I thought when you did that in the book, and he's not a sympathetic character, especially when you get to the end and you kind of see the choices he's made that have led Sarah to where she is. But I think we don't have to entertain it, but we have to hear it. And we sort of have to understand, as I was reading those passages, I was like, oh, I get it.
Mhm.
It's not my choices. I still think he made some really bad choices in the book, the father. But I would imagine I would, what am I? I was like, this must have really made Attica uncomfortable to write this, because I'm uncomfortable reading it, honestly.
Well, the truth of the matter that here's I want to say several things. I definitely want to come back to failure because I have a theory of what you get out of facing it. But I started thinking about this book during lockdown. So I knew that I was, doing this book series. I did not know when I started this book that it would be the final, that I would call this a trilogy. But I thought my next book in the series was going to be in Laredo. And
Oh,
I wanted, because 59 goes all the way down to the border. And
goes
I
all the
thought
way.
I was going to do all over the place. But then I couldn't go to Laredo. We were in a global lockdown. And I thought, I will never be able to write about Laredo if I can't go. Am I ever going to leave my house ever again? Oh no. And I started thinking, wait a minute now. I don't, maybe I closed this series out. Maybe I actually closed this out. So the things that happened during the pandemic were that I witnessed were, one, the government's disregard for Americans' health, the failure of healthcare, because Obamacare is just trying to put a band-aid on a not great system.
Right.
And God bless it. God, thank God it's here, but it's not perfect, because really, if you ask me, I would say universal healthcare. I mean, that's what I would be saying. So I'm thinking during this lockdown of months, the government is not taking care of its citizens in terms of healthcare. The other thing I saw was that companies, corporations, meat packing plants did not care. And they were sending people to work and people were dying.
Yeah.
And that marriage of those two things played a big role in my feeling like, okay, left, right, maybe the villain is a system that's beyond left and right, but it's when profit is supreme, when private industry is supreme, we're all in trouble.
Mm,
We're all in big trouble. So that's where a lot of the willingness to say, there are people who could sit at home and say, when Obamacare came, I didn't have shit, or it was really hard for me to care for my family. And it is true for them. But I just allowed for the fact that left, right, center, people are getting screwed in this country every different way. I want to say what I think I got out of facing failure.
mhm.
When I say that I thought, and you're right, we do live in cancel culture. We just live in a time where there's not a lot of grace. There's not a lot of margin for error for people. Or, everybody's just hot. Everybody's just hot about something. I was so scared that I actually started to ask myself that I wondered if the universe with this book was giving me the opportunity to feel like what it's going to feel like to be publicly humiliated. That's literally language I used, because I could not write the book. The book would not veer off of what it wanted to be. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, okay. Then I might fail and I have to live with that. I have to live with that. And what it gave me, I think, was freedom. Now, it was not freedom from anxiety or pain. But there was a kind of freedom and am I going to die really from the public? Not really. I'm not, there's a kind of like, okay, and you
And
failed.
life is
Is my
long.
husband, yeah, is my husband gonna stop loving me? Is my kid gonna stop liking me? Is the sun not gonna rise tomorrow? Like it just, there was a sense of it, as the kids say, it's not that deep. And I say all that to say, while also still being like, it's not gonna feel good, but it may happen. And I just accept whatever's coming. I just accept whatever's coming. To the point where when I got one of the first reviews, I wept because I was like, I'm not, I just knew this could go really not good. So it'll take me years of therapy to understand why this book scared me so much, but it terrified me.
I sensed it, not in a bad way,
Mm,
but I sensed it. I was like, in a way, I didn't sense it in Heaven, My Home, and Bluebird, Bluebird.
hmm.
I thought there was more on the line in this book for
You know
the
what Carl said?
huh.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go, yes.
Because the other thing, okay, so Heaven My Home was written in, it came out in 2019, so it was written like 2017, 2018. Since then, there'd been an insurrection, several impeachments, a pandemic, George Floyd, more mass shootings than I can count. What Carl said about this book, he's like, it's as if your protagonist wants out of this genre. And that scared the crap out of me, that Darren wanted out of the genre, that he was done with guns, that he was done with it. He was done with policing. And that's what scared the crap out of me because I didn't want, I love crime fiction. Crime fiction gave me my career. I didn't want people to think that I was shitting on it, while at the same time I cannot write about guns in the same way. I don't know if ever again. You cannot, as a citizen, have experience. What has it been between 2019? How many mass shootings?
Yeah.
How many mass shootings? I can't count. I can't write about a gun being the answer anymore. I just
Mhm.
can't. Nor can I write about policing being a perfect solution or that you could ever blindly believe in the badge. So I was really scared that the people that had bought the books would think I was turning my back on them because I was not following the tropes of the genre as closely.
Mhm.
That the real mystery for me in the book is him and his mom. Yes, there's this other mystery, but him and his mom was the real thing I cared about. And I worried that that was going to show and people would be like, well, this isn't a mystery. This isn't doing what I wanted to do. And I thought they would be valid for saying that because the book is different.
I want to talk about Belle Callis, and it ties back into this trope, and now it's really starting to make sense to me hearing you talk about how you're turning the genre on its head and some of the choices that you made, and you're pushing all of, you're just kind of poking all of these sort of held beliefs, and I was really fascinated by the Belle relationship with Darren, and I thought after I read it and all the ups and downs of their relationship in the book, I felt Attica really went in on this idea of we're going to break down this trope of the Black mama who
Mm,
is revered, soul food. We sing songs about mama. And then we get this woman who is a drunk who may or may not have turned her son over to the DA. And you literally just take that whole narrative and you go, why? Why did you do that?
um, I found my way to it. So I can answer looking back because I didn't really know where Belle was going. Like when I knew when I started the book series, when I started Bluebird, I knew he was not raised by his mother. I knew that she had the story he heard willingly given him up. I knew there were class dynamics of why the uncles whisked him away, issues of poverty or looking down on her people. I knew all of this, but literally I'm learning about myself as a writer 6 books in that because I noticed this when I write scripts too. I really find the work in the doing of it, not the hovering above thinking about it. So Jane Smiley says writing is writing, writing is not planning. So it's
Mhm.
only when I get into the flow of it, the way my brain goes into kind of a state of being is where surprises come out. So when I first wrote the very first scene of Belle, she's sitting on the front steps of her trailer, picking off toenail polish off of her toes with a beer and a cigarette and tells her son that there's food inside, come on in, and there's no food inside. It's some old stuff on the stove. She's trying to get him inside to talk. She wants his attention. She's drunk. He has to hide her keys. Like, it's only in the writing that I go, oh, that's who this person is?
Yeah.
Oh, well, let me follow that. And then over the course of the first two books, oh, okay, lady. Oh, you about something. And also your blackmail is so prosaic. It is both bring me a case of beer and just clean my gutters and just spend time with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think when I look over the course of my life, I think I like writing about ambivalent mothers. And I think she's an ambivalent mother. I think there's love there, but there's also just my life didn't do what I wanted it to do. And somehow I'm gonna blame you for that.
Yeah.
Um, but I found her and I knew what she had done in the first two books. And I knew that there was no way to close out a trilogy where these two don't figure this stuff out.
Right.
And it tickled me in a way that interested me to know, and the idea that these two would be on a case together, it just killed me. It just killed me. And I was like, well, I'm gonna figure out a way to make that happen.
This is what you wrote about the mother. He's gone to the mom's home and she's there with the brother who we meet. And he's watching Belle and Pete interact. And what you write, you say, it was exquisitely strange listening to his mother talk of caretaking for another. Either age had brought her here to the tenderness of life, an understanding and appreciation for its utter fragility, or there had always been a gentle spot in her soul that had just never found a need for expression, certainly not as a mother. He felt bitter about it, but also tired.
Mm.
He was tired of hating his mom, especially since the one he knew to hate didn't appear to be in this room. There was a Belle Callis in his mind for whom he still felt rage, but the quiet older woman before him now elicited only compassion, raw and unexamined, a pure human impulse to care.
Okay, I'm crying, and I'm crying. I don't mean it from a place of like, it's not that I'm crying about the quality of the passage. I'm crying because I know that I could only have written that because I'm 50.
Mm,
I could only have written that because I've aged. Like I'm hearing in that the grace of getting older, of
mm,
just cutting folks some slack. It's just hard. It's hard. It's a wondrous thing to be alive. It's hard to be alive. And I think it's with one of the gifts of aging is cutting yourself some slack, but also cutting other people some slack. And I think that's where the tears are coming from. It's
mm,
just a feeling of I've been more tender with my parents as I've gotten older. I've been more, the things I was hard on them about. I'm like, they were just trying to do. I'm now the age that they were when I was being hard on them, and I'm about to send a kid to college.
mm.
So I think it is no accident that this book is dedicated to every mother whose child only knows half the story.
Ooh,
I think as a mother about to launch my child off into the world, and probably unconsciously, or I'm saying it so consciously, thinking there are things about me that my child may never know. And she's in a way not even supposed to. The selflessness of motherhood is so profound
mm,
because your kid doesn't even know all the things that you did for them, and they'll never know. And that means the stories you didn't tell them. That means the stuff that you maybe hid, that because you thought it might have not been the right decision, but you thought it was the right decision. There's a lot of things about motherhood that are shrouded, that are kind of hidden. And it is a beast of a thing, being a mother. It is a real weird, wild thing. Um, and as somebody who, has had her own ups and downs with her own mother, it is something to see how I mother
mhm.
and to just release and let go of the things you don't control. You don't control how your kid sees you.
Yeah. You
In
have,
fact, Claire and I we went to Mexico for a trip. It was supposed to be a trip to Greece, but there was passport drama. We ended up in Tulum. And Clara is at an age where she's torn between, she's trying to wrestle with how much privilege she has, that she has privilege of being an upper middle class kid, private school, da da da, versus these leftist impulses that she has, and that her parents' politics. And she was giving me so much grief in Mexico because I was shopping, I was being bougie, I was being, and it was a fight. We had a fight in a restaurant where she was just, I'm just tired of seeing you buy stuff and blah blah. She had all this stuff to say while she getting pina coladas and at this resort. But I wrote her, yes, that's how they be. So I wrote her a text because we were fighting, and I sometimes find I can text her things I know she will hear, and she can consume it in her own way. And I said, Clara, you actually get to decide from this moment on what our relationship is. You get to set the table. If you never wanted to talk to me ever again, you don't have to. Like it's you now. So all I can say is I'm not going to get everything right, but I am going to ask for grace. I'm just going to ask for grace. And I just left it there. And I know she heard it because I heard her repeat to a friend, my mom told me that I get to decide what this relationship is now. So I know she heard it. So that's what's so weird about being a parent is like, you just have to let go. You just have to let them go. And they're not going to understand everything you did or why. And it's not promised that they'll forgive you for everything that you did.
Mm. And he's really in search of those answers in the book. And I think she tries to give it to him, those answers, as much as she can through her memory that may not be accurate and all of that kind of stuff. But the mother-son dynamic really resonated because I was like, yeah, that's a complex relation. As much as we may adore all of our mothers, and that is not an easy relationship to navigate. And no one's relationship is clean. No,
Mm-hmm.
you don't get to be in your 40s and 50s with parents
Mm-hmm.
and have it be clean relationships because it's just too much. We've seen too much, particularly being kids coming out of the 70s, and we know too much, and we don't know enough all at the
Yeah.
same.
And I'm gonna tell you what, those boomer parents, they kept their stuff on lock. I mean, you don't even know what was going on. I mean, we'll never know.
We'll
There's
never
some
know.
stuff we will never know.
We'll never know, and they're fine with that.
They are totally fine with it.
There's no here is the family history. There's none of that. It's just like it happened. We're moving on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there was kind of a brilliance in that, and also I need you to explain to me what's going on. So
I'm gonna need some answers.
I'm gonna need just one.
Oh my
But
God.
I want to talk to you because I like talking to you, but I want to read a couple of passages to you because I want to talk to you about structure. And I want to talk to you about how you use language. When I was taking notes, I was like, Attica is able to use language in a way that completely exposes the moment and completely draws me as the reader into the world through which the character she's writing about sees the world. And the way that you use language in the book, I'll give you a few examples. So on page 7, Sarah and Ray are at their little hideout spot, and this is what you write. And what you're expressing is the dreams are impossible. They both know it, right? As they're sitting out here in this field, in this forest. And you write, they, Sarah and Ray, would make seats of loose bricks and stare up at the pines, the tips of which seemed as impossible to reach as the sky, as Ray's dreams for his future. You wrote that. And then you wrote on page 18, this is where I was like, oh, Attica's going there. So we're in the Trump presidency and all of the feelings about that. And we're looking through Darren's lens of all of this. And he says, he realizes from his perspective, the founding fathers were just men who liked to talk big all night after tying on a few, scribbling down laws and ideals that contradicted themselves every third paragraph, dreaming up an institution of freedom on a foundation built by slaves. It was all a house of cards, smoke and mirrors, just marks on parchment, with holes you could drive a truck through. And a talented huckster got behind the wheel of one and drove it all the way to the White House. And then you write on page 27, And it's all throughout the book. This is I was just marking them. You wrote again, he's trying not to drink because Darren has a drinking
Mhm.
problem. He's thinking about his mom, and you write that the rising bow of hate he felt toward her scared him, as did the impossibility of holding the hate firmly in his hands. It kept slipping through his fingers like the notes in the song that he was playing. The blue guitar plucked at his rage, then bent it till he felt the bruised violet beneath. So when you're writing that, how are you writing that? How are you choosing the words and the metaphors and the similes and just pulling that into the work?
Two things. One, it is what I was saying before, that it's almost like you get into a state of being and you just let it flow. I also feel like I write with sound, like I write how it would sound to read it. Like I write orally in a way. Like how is it pleasurable to listen to? So I feel like listening is a big part of how I write, but it's very much getting into a state of being. And you should know that for every one of those passages, it's a bunch that got cut out because they was doing too much, or they just didn't make any sense, or I have a ton of stuff that didn't make it in. And I'm interested when you talk about structure, because I can tell you how, having gone all the way through the making of a television show, all the way through from scratch, how post-production changed how I wrote this book. It was
Mm.
really weird. I did not see that coming. Post-production is a conjurer's room. I mean, editors are absolute magicians. And when you get into post-production on a show, you literally might reorganize the entire plot of how things happen, what order they happen in. Or you are finding just the right take where somebody's eyebrow does just this and it changes the whole feel of the scene. And you're moving things around, so that when I wrote this, I found myself doing things like, oh, well, this passage is great. It simply does not belong where it is. It doesn't belong there. It allowed me to throw things away, because we threw a lot of stuff away in post production. I probably had much more permission to go, well, that was great, but it just doesn't belong in the book, so it's gone. Or that passage is great. Let me just save it over here and see if it ever fits anywhere else. It might not. And then sometimes I would put things in. I just had such a sense of moving blocks around. And I
Mm.
know other writers write like that. I've heard that other writers will write pieces and lay everything out on a big floor and move pages around. But I always wrote more linearly. But post production gave me this kind of permission to bend and like put things together in a different way. And I thought that was really interesting to observe. And I think it grew me up a little bit as a writer. It made me feel like I had this new skill set.
You said earlier that you knew what role Belle is going to play in the story when you wrote the first book. You had an understanding. And we've talked about your process before, and you say that you know where you need to go. Like when you're writing a mystery, you have to kind of know who did it. Like it can't be like, oh, I just figured that out as I was writing it. You know,
Well, I will say my first 3 books, I did not know who did it when I
you
started.
didn't know who did it.
That's why they're so long, Patrick, because I was like, I'm just gonna keep writing until I figure it out. That's why those books are so damn long.
I don't know. But how much how much are how much in the structure of the story, and particularly in the character development, because the characters are so intricate, how much of that is you knowing and them talking? And how do you know when to foreground your voice and foreground their voice?
So I'm gonna start with the first thing, like, how do I know? I don't always know, but I have long ago gave myself permission to circle back to the beginning. Like, so if I'm going along and I discover something that I've not laid the groundwork for, I will go back and do the work of laying the groundwork to do that. And I will circle back to the front over and over and over again and go back through in a past, might just be about Joseph and Sarah, like father daughter, just looking at their kind of thing. And in terms of my voice versus the character's voice, it's very intuitive. Dialogue is my favorite thing to write. It's the thing that comes most easily to me. Although I'm getting better about writing passages. Sometimes if it's just like a passage of describing something pastoral, that can come like really easily. if there's a passage where I'm trying to say, like, make a very, very particular point and thread a needle, I could be on that paragraph for 3 hours,
Wow.
just really trying to get it, just really trying to get, no, that's going too far. That's not saying enough. Or I need a color of this feeling in the sentence, but not that. Like that, I can be on that for a minute when I'm trying to express like a big philosophical idea. When
Mhm.
I'm describing the pastoral beauty of Texas, I mean, we know it. Like that just flows. And I love people talking. So I think Darren and I, the narrator, I guess me and the right, like they're very close. So I go through the book making choice to hew closer to what he thinks and see everything kind of through his point of view, even though Attica, am writing Belle with compassion. I'm writing the narrator is there's behavior that she's doing, and they're in the car together, and she wanted to offer him some candy, because trying to give up drinking, giving him sugar. Like I'm doing behavior for her that says that there's love there, that there's care there. But I'm in other ways writing her through the lens of Darren. Like he's the North Star of it all. So I hope that made kind of sense.
How do you feel after living with the world of Darren Mathews? How do you feel of saying a sort of goodbye to that after almost 10 years of your life? And then what is it opening up for you to say goodbye to that?
Beautiful question. Because the opening up is a big part of me also wanting this to be a trilogy, of having a sense that there's something more that I want to do. I can't even name what it is yet, but there's a book out there that is calling to me. I have no plot. I have no anything. I just know it's going to feel like a challenge and it's going to need space. I already miss Darren. I already miss him. I love him dearly. I like hearing what other people think of him. So that keeps him alive when people say, how they feel about him. Timby and I are messing around with the idea of turning this into a television show. So then there is how he would live on screen and be different than the guy who was on paper. So I think another part of the thing that scared me about this book was the saying goodbye, the arbitrariness of saying goodbye, because it was my choice. It was my choice of realizing I have a career in Hollywood. I have there were all these reasons in which I was not sure that I could keep writing this book series for another 5, 10 years
Right.
because of the state of the world, because of my feelings about, and because where I thought Darren, the way this book ends, the series had to end that way. It just had to. There was like no question.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to discovering him in a new medium with the hope that I like the idea of the adaptation as something the book doesn't have. The book has things that the adaptation doesn't have. So he's going to be different. And then there's this whole other voice in there, which is Tempe, who sees things she sees differently than me. Tempe is Team Lisa. I am Team Randy. I don't know how we gonna write a show.
Wait, people are actually Team Lisa after Greg and all that?
I think that in the show, Timby wants a version where Lisa's point of view is real clear, just like we're seeing Belle's point of view. She's like, he is not an easy person to be married to.
Well, he's a drunk.
Yes, a
I
drunk.
mean,
With I think what we're exploring more in the series, if we are lucky enough to have that, is looking at the part of him that is unconsciously in a hero complex, and Lisa feeling like I can't compete with that. So the new girl comes in and you done saved her. You done solved her husband's murder. She's looking up to you. She makes you feel a certain way as a man. I can't compete with that shit,
yeah.
and that's a valid thing to say.
So much of the book is contextualized in the Trump years, and looking out from that, and Clara being ready to go to college. I'm curious what your take is on where we are today, because you have a daughter who is biracial, who's stepping into a world that may make more sense to her than it did to us, certainly our grandparents, in terms of the social zeitgeist context. But I'm wondering how you view this time now for a daughter who is stepping out into life.
If you had asked me this question, well, let me start with this. Let me start with her and her generation. Now we tease these Gen Zs with their slang and I'm capping for this and simping for that and them TikTok dances, whatever. But there is a brightness to them and a sense of their own agency that I feel very strongly with these Gen Z people and have seen, and I'm a person who's spends way too much time on TikTok, but I see a philosophical way of looking at the world. I see a belief in activism got reignited with them. And I feel good about the future when I think about them. I
Mm,
actually do think that if they stop doing a dance long enough to, write up a proposal for something, we're going to be fine. We're going to be great. And my daughter in particular is more self-possessed than I think I ever could have hoped to be at her age. So I feel very confident in that way.
yeah.
The state of the world, if we had had this conversation before the present, we're in the Democratic National Convention as we have this conversation. If
Yes.
we had talked a month ago, I was uh pretty much prostrate on the floor, just like I am terrified. I'm really scared. And I kept thinking to myself, I don't know that I survive another Trump presidency. It will literally break me. The first one broke my brain. It honestly broke my brain.
Yeah.
And I still can't make sense of, wait, a felon? Wait, what? What?
34 times.
Yeah. Oh, them Epstein files. So I was very, very scared. I'm much more optimistic now that we are looking at a landscape with a Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, the word ceasefire was uttered at the Democratic National Convention last night, along with bringing home hostages. So I have a greater sense of hope. My blood pressure went down from the day Biden stepped down and Kamala was our new front runner. And I'm very pleased and hopeful. And I have this weird fantasy that if I just stopped writing a book series that inadvertently became about the Trump era, if I just stop writing it, maybe it'll go away. Maybe it'll just all be over. I don't know. I
And in
don't
our
know.
last conversation, you said that you believe that love and nonviolence was the only way out.
Hmm.
And I think I wanted to agree. I was kind of skeptical because it's sometimes good to be skeptical and question things.
I added something to it. Go ahead.
However, joy has become
Yeah.
the trademark of
Yeah.
what is becoming a movement. And I think I was like, Attica was right. You can't stay in that state of like, "Ah, no."
No,
It's
no.
so like it's exhausting.
And when Tim Walz said joy at his first speech, he had like 5 or 6 times, and they were saying it last night. Joy, 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 joy.
Joy.
Yeah. And I added something to love and nonviolence being, I wrote that nonviolence it is the only sustaining principle of life, but so is the truth. And we can't live if we can't all agree that 2 and 2 is 4.
Yeah.
We can't live without it, without objective truth.
And it still exists. I think,
Yeah.
no, I don't think I know. There is still objective truth. And I think the numbers tell us that most Americans believe there is objective truth.
You know what I hope, Patrick? I hope you just said we can't be like this all the time. I do hope, that saying from that book, What the Bleep Do We Know Anyway? That
Mhm.
neurons that fire together, wire together, that you
Yes.
can rewire I hope we've not gotten so addicted to chaos that we won't even know what to do with ourselves in a field of joy.
I want to ask you about book banning because I think that's
Mhm.
important. And I want to ask you how you as an artist create with the specter of book banning over you. And also, I just want to state for the record, book banning is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of because we have this little thing called the internet.
Yeah, right.
I can just go read the book, like
Yeah,
download it.
yeah.
Like it's all it's cosplay, right? Like you said, it's
Mhm.
cosplay, but it's very impactful. And I'm wondering how that is changing you as the artist writing and how the publisher is in taking that information in when they choose to publish a book. Is that part of the calculus?
I have never gotten that from a publisher, thank goodness. Within myself, it's been more of a greater fear that I could be in trouble. I was worried more not just about book banning. I was worried like literally about moving into a culture where, I mean, we're at the place where the punitiveness about things that are against an administration could lead to being incarcerated.
Mhm.
So I was much more worried about, could I actually get in trouble? And I've actually had, oh my God, I don't even bring it into the universe, but I've had thoughts about people rolling up on me places. I've had thoughts like that. So it's been more fear of my physical well-being than the book burning themselves. But book burning is exactly as you said, absolutely stupid.
I have a last question for you. I think even more than film and television, books have a staying power.
Mhm.
We don't use celluloid anymore, but celluloid could degenerate, and those movies
Mhm.
were gone, and no one never saw them again. But there's something about a book, I think, that has a lasting quality to it. And I wonder, when someone reads one of your books 100 years from now, what is going to be the legacy of the work that you have created, do you think?
I think I can only say what I hope it will be, because 100 years from now, I don't know. I hope that people would pick up a book thinking that they knew something about Texas, or let's say for this series, or about Louisiana and sugar plantations, or Houston in the 80s or whatever, and would read it and realize, oh, they didn't actually know as much as they thought they did. It's infinitely more rich and complicated, contradictory than they would have thought. And I hope that in that rich complication is literature. I hope that there's a sense of, hey, this region of the country is worthy of literature. These Black Texans are worthy of having their points of view, their lives, their history written down. Um, the exact thing you're talking about, the physicality to me is the legacy, that it got written down, that it can't be undone, that a 21st century Black woman writing on the other, her whole life on the other side of the civil rights movement, what is the next thing after you can vote, and after you can, it, to me, it's at the level of the psyche, it's at the level of psychological freedom and understanding the psychological complexity of our villains, of the people who are up against us. Who hurt them and why, what is going on there?
Mm.
Yeah. And hopefully they were like, oh, this girl could tell a story. Hopefully they're like,
Alika, thank you so much for your time today. I so appreciate it.
oh, Patrick, miss you.
Miss you. It is so good to talk to you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you. These conversations are always so deep, so interesting, so warm, so engaging. It's a good way to start my day.
Thank you, Attica. And to those of you who are watching or listening, remember, we all have a voice. We all will leave a legacy. Use yours wisely. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Attica.